We begin, however, in Halifax, where defense and security leaders from around the world are gathering at an international security forum. Top of the agenda, Russia's illegal war on Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy opened the forum.
Most of the discussions at this year's forum will address one question: how to end the Russian war. But I will ask you to formulate more precise question: how to restore real and just peace.
Anita Anand is Canada's Minister of Defence. We caught up with her in Halifax. Minister, I'd like to start with, the initial assessments of the incident in Poland this week. The United States and NATO, they indicate that this missile strike was an accident of a Ukrainian air defense missile. Does Canada agree with that assessment?
Canada has offered to support Poland in the investigation with the forensics, and there is an active investigation ongoing, and it would be most prudent if we await for the results of that investigation before opining and commenting on the source and cause of those missile strikes.
So the initial assessment, though, that we're hearing from NATO, from the United States, you have no position at this point? It's too premature, you think?
At this point, we are awaiting the final results of that examination. But I will say, David, we've got to remember that this entire conflict has been caused by an unjust and illegal invasion by Vladimir Putin of an otherwise sovereign country. And so I don't want that to get lost in the questions that you're posing as well. That we need to make sure that we continue to stand strong with Ukraine in the short and the long term. That's why Canada put over $1 billion on the table in total. That's why I announced 34 million additional items of aid this week. That's why we've transported over £5 million of aid from Prestwick, Scotland, and that's why we've trained over 34,000 Ukrainian troops. It's all in aid of Ukraine's sovereignty, stability, and security.
No, I certainly don't want to leave the impression that my questions were trying to mitigate any of the responsibility that Russia and President Putin bear from this, because even the Polish ambassador to Canada, he was here with me the other day, and he said essentially the same thing, that none of this happens if Russia isn't launching missiles at civilians and civilian targets and civilian infrastructure as part of the invasion. But we asked because of the potential implications for NATO, and also because Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has categorically said that it wasn't Ukraine and that they have information that it wasn't them. Should President Zelenskyy be jumping to such conclusions if the investigation is still in this early phase?
I'm focused as Minister of National Defense on putting military aid on the table for Ukraine. I'm focused on making sure we are transporting aid. I'm focused on making sure we're training Ukrainian soldiers. That is what I'll continue to be working on in the short and the long term. I am at the Halifax International Security Forum right now. I'll be delivering remarks which speak to our commitment to Ukraine, which speak to our commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, and which speak to our continental defense and Arctic security. Those are the items that I'm focused on right now.
Okay, those are the items I wanted to focus on at this point, so it's a perfect setup for my next question. You've announced this week an extra $500 million in military aid for Ukraine. I wonder if you can give us an update on some of the previous announcements. For example, the 39 armored vehicles your government promised for Ukraine. Are those in theater yet? Have they been delivered? What's the status of some of these previous announcements that you've made?
Previous announcements are continuing to ensure that we are delivering the aid that we've committed. So, for example, we are having training that is occurring on those armored vehicles right now in Germany. A C-17 left Trenton last weekend filled with aid that I have already announced: winter clothing, satellite communication technology, as well as cameras for drones. So I announced the aid, and the aid starts to be transported to Ukraine. That's exactly what we will continue to do. And the £5 million of aid, David, that we've transported from Prestwick, Scotland, with 3 CC-130s, transports 8 of our allies. It also transports Canadian aid. That's why we've got such an active outfit in Prestwick, Scotland at the current time.
So you mentioned training on these armored vehicles happening in Germany. Is this sort of a cart and horse situation that training needs to be completed before all 39 of those vehicles can go into theater? Because you need to know how to use the gear before you get the gear. Is that where that particular commitment lies right now?
With 39 vehicles, David, they are at different stages in the delivery process, and some of those are being used for training right now. Some of those are being delivered in theater. Some of those are being transported. As you can imagine, the delivery of armored vehicles is highly complex, and we are making sure that that aid gets delivered in good time to the Ukrainian Armed Forces. At the same time, I have been in active communication with my counterpart, Alexei Reznikov, to ensure that when we spend the additional $500 million that the Government of Canada just put on the table this week, we are fulfilling the needs of Ukraine with resources that we have in Canada by reaching out to Canadian industry, by partnering with industry, by procuring items that we have specialty in, such as cameras for drones, such as armored vehicles, such as winter clothing. That's where my expertise in contracting, I think, is being used effectively, and we'll continue to make sure that procurements with Canadian industry carry us forward with expending the additional $500 million that we put on the table this week.
Okay, Minister, one other topic you mentioned is Indo-Pacific strategy, and a key component of that obviously is China. And I'm sure you've seen the video of Chinese President Xi Jinping very publicly confronting Prime Minister Trudeau at the G20. Some of his comments have been viewed by close China watchers as a threat, veiled or otherwise, towards the Prime Minister and toward Canada. How do you view the implications of this confrontation that we've all seen by now? I
think that it is completely on for the Prime Minister to suggest that we need to make sure that we are transparent in our communications and that we bring Canadians up to speed in terms of our relationships with other countries, which is exactly what we will continue to do, regardless of the country at issue. And I will say as well that as we roll out our Indo-Pacific strategy, we will be eyes wide open on China. We will be making sure that from a defense and military perspective, we are contributing to a fair and open Indo-Pacific where we make sure we've got resources in place. We already have 2 frigates there, David. And so quite apart from that one conversation, I want to take a step back and recognize that Canadian Armed Forces presence in the Indo-Pacific will continue to grow with our Indo-Pacific strategy.
But how do you view President Xi's comments, Minister? Do you view that as a threat, and do you expect some sort of pushback beyond that from the Chinese state?
David, as a Minister of National Defense, my focus has to be on ensuring that we have our military resources and our security apparatus in place to defend this country and to participate in international operations, whether it's in the Indo-Pacific or whether it's in Europe. And so I will refrain from commenting on that particular exchange of words, and I will continue to focus on my job.
Okay. Minister Anand, thank you so much for your time. Canada is refraining from weighing in on that deadly missile strike in Poland earlier this week.
There is an active investigation ongoing, and it would be most prudent if we await for the results of that investigation before opining and commenting on the source and cause of those missile strikes.
NATO, Poland, and the United States all say preliminary evidence suggests the strike was the result of a wayward Ukrainian air defense missile, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is adamant that's not the case. Petro Poroshenko served as president of Ukraine from 2014 to 2019. He's in Halifax. Mr. Poroshenko, I'd like to start, if I could, with the missile that hit Poland this week. President Zelenskyy says there's no way that was a Ukrainian missile, but the early assessment from Poland, NATO, and the United States is that it was a Ukrainian missile. What do you believe happened there?
I think that under any circumstances, this is the Russian responsibility. You cannot imagine what feel Ukrainian throughout the whole Ukrainian territory when 100 cruise missiles flying from Russia and attacking the peace object of the critical energy infrastructure. And it's happening just 800 meters in Kyiv from my office. Big blast, great smoke, and immediately absence of the electricity. And the dozens of millions of Ukrainians are now stay without electricity, without water, without heating during the cold temperature of the late autumn or winter. And definitely it is a discussion, but most important thing, Ukraine should be open for the whole investigation. Ukraine should be a participant of the investigation team. Ukraine should be transparent, and the trust between the partners is our top priority. I don't have any information about the details of the situation, but most probably if Zelenskyy saying that, he would be ready to present an evidence. And let's wait until the investigation would be finished. But the most important thing is that Ukraine definitely and urgently need the anti-missile technology and weapons to protect the object of the critical energy infrastructure, because now we have destroyed more than 50% of the energy infrastructure. And this is not only people, this is not only the hospital and kindergarten, this is also the industrial factories, which is completely stopped. And this was the wishes of the Putin to introduce the cold winter blackmail to weaponize the energy question. And the reaction of the Ukrainian people is demonstrating that we are not accepting any blackmail languages, no matter if it is blackmail on starvation,
right,
blackmail on the nuclear contamination, or anything else, including the energy blackmail.
I wonder if we could explore that a little bit more. I mean, we've spoken to a former commander of NATO on the show last night, who suggests that even with the critical infrastructure that's been hit by Russian missiles, that the military would have some redundancy and backups, and the armed forces of Ukraine would be able to function reasonably well under these circumstances. But it's the civilians, it's the population that's really going to struggle here. So how serious is that situation in your country right now, with all of this electricity knocked offline and with temperatures dropping significantly?
First of all, I'm very much proud that me, as the 5th President of Ukraine, Supreme Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces, we create the armed forces who surprised the world. And we are now demonstrated that the armed forces is one of the best on the continent. And with that situation, Putin understands that he has no any future with the attack of our armed forces on the front line, with the assistance of our most important alliance with from the whole world. But now he switched the object of the attack and attacked the civilian object. And definitely it is difficult. Definitely, can you imagine that me in Kyiv, in my house, in my office, we stay without electricity for more than 12 hours a day. And this is difficult. But if we have a choice between the freedom or to be the slave, we choose freedom and democracy. And we do not trade freedom for energy. And this is definitely disappoint Putin, because that is a pressure on Ukraine, pressure on Ukrainian people, and we do not accept this pressure. He want to undermine our internal unity. We demonstrate from the 24th of February, he want to undermine the stability inside Ukraine, and we don't give him this gift. We have now united, and we have one enemy, Putin, and we do our best to pass this winter successfully with the assistance of the whole world.
You said just a second ago that your military has surprised the world with their defense of your country and now the counteroffensive that's happening, that's pushing Russia back. What is your sense of where the military campaign is right now in Ukraine? I mean, Russia appears to be on the run to a degree, but they still have a significant presence inside Ukrainian territory. What's your sense of where the fight is right now?
We use, the main achievement is that we switch the system of organizing the armed forces from the Soviet style that they have before my presidency to the NATO style. And I'm proud that we attract lots of our partners to prepare and to reform the armed forces. And now we demonstrate it because we change the game during this war. In the year 2014 first time and year 2022 when we threw Russian away from Kyiv because we, with a weapon in the hands, protecting Kyiv in the first weeks of the war, and we don't allow them to penetrate to Kyiv, and we cut the logistic and supply, and Russia should flee away from the Ukrainian territory, first from Kyiv, from Chernihiv, and few weeks ago from Kharkiv, and few days ago from Kherson. And this is just an evidence that Putin understands that he has no absolute perspective. Why? First of all, because Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian people has absolutely enormous motivation because we protecting our country, we protecting our families, we protecting our people, and Putin barbarian come to Ukraine do not have any motivation to stay there. That's why when we have even less soldiers, when we have significantly less weapons, we can stop Russia and throw them away. And I'm definitely confident that that would be continuing more and more because Ukrainian armies start to be stronger and stronger with the Western supply, and Russia become weaker and weaker.
Well, you say Ukrainian soldiers are becoming stronger and stronger, but now the weather is getting colder and colder, and winter has a way of changing battlefields and changing conflicts. What does Ukraine need for the battlefield from countries like Canada and from the West to deal with the weather, and what do you need for your civilian population as things turn cold?
Look, exactly 1 year ago, when I was on Halifax Security Forum in 2021, I said Ukraine need, at that time, before the full-size war, we need weapons and sanction and embargo. I can only repeat again, Ukraine need more weapons, Ukraine need stronger and stricter sanction and embargo. And now we have a new peculiarity because they said that we have necessary to supply the converter or generator or some important details for the energy infrastructure. And I can confirm it, definitely yes. But together with the electric spare parts, we need the anti-missiles technology, which should be protected and close the sky above the object of the critical energy infrastructure. And combination of these two factors would be definitely extremely helpful. Definitely I want to thank Canada for the decision which was making in Ramstein meeting. By the way, I like this format, Ramstein, because this is like a full-size anti-Putin coalition of the world. And I am very much proud about the role of the Canada there, including the 500 million Canadian dollars in the military support. But please, again, anti-aircraft, anti-missile technology, and anti-drone technology, and jet fighter, and spare parts for the critical energy infrastructure converter,
right,
and the generator.
Okay, Petro Poroshenko, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.